Thank you. I'm going to stand here to speak because I want to give you some shared evidence, because I've just changed jobs recently. My job was before that a professor at a university where I could do lots of research and visit lots of countries, and I think I've been probably in more countries of the world than most people. But I stopped that job and started a new job on September the 1st. The new job keeps me very much in England, except for today. But my new job is not one of a professor in the ivory tower of the university. It's as a civil servant running the schools in southern England. It's a lot of schools. In fact, it's over 1,200 schools and colleges. But this is, in English, what they say, I now have to put my money where my mouth is. Because if I don't do a very good job of those schools, then I get the sack. I'm no longer just able to talk, I have to do. And I have to work with many, many, many thousands of children, many thousands of teachers, deputy heads of schools, school principals, regional school officials, teacher education providers, and also I have to look upwards, not to God, although that's helpful at times, but to the ministers of education, of which there are 3 in England who tell me what I must do. And at the moment, as Christopher pointed out, the laws for education are changing so quickly that I have one member of staff doing nothing but look at the law changes that are going on. So I want to talk not in a theoretical way, but in a practical way, what the research tells us. Because otherwise an event such as this is a little bit preaching to the converted. You all believe this or you wouldn't be here. So actually what I'm giving you is information to take back to your colleagues who would not be here. Okay? So the first thing I want to say is that creativity gives the child a lot of things. I describe these as capital that they will spend during their time at school, but also capital that they'll take into their life in the future. Obviously, the important one is the capacity to be creative. It's also their artistic heritage, and there is no better place than Spain in the world to see the value of an artistic heritage on the development of human population. They will take a cultural understanding. And unlike Finland, the area that's covered by my new job has many schools where 98% of the children in that school were not born in England and do not speak English. It will help you economically. It is now worth money to be a creative person. In England, apart from banking, which is not done very well, the next biggest industry in England is the fashion and retail industry, where creativity is the core of earning a lot of money. It gives us a social capital. And once again, like Vancouver, like Spain, over the summer in London, we saw a fairly calm place turn into a very angry place very quickly, when those social things went wrong. The use of so-called social media turned the calmness of London into chaos. Even I live about 20 miles out of London, and it touched even there within 2 days. The spread was very rapid. Innovation capital. One of the things to be successful in any business now is you need to be constantly innovating. When cars were first invented, there was one car, one model, and everybody got it. Now every car company releases at least 6 new models of cars every year. And those models of cars have endless possibilities of how you can personalise them and make them different just for you. You've heard a lot this morning about the importance of a spiritual capital, feeling good as a human being, realising there's more to being on this planet than simply walking around. Educational capital is what I want to focus on in my talk, which is how you can do this and get the very best results. Then I want to finish with 4 perhaps less well-known capitals. The first one I call negative loss capital. And I say simply, can you afford not to do this? Can you afford not to give your children a good education. Comparative capital. Could you spend your money in a better way doing something else? This is particularly important as we run out of money. The hospitals are saying they need more money. The schools are saying they need more resources. What's the best way for us to spend our money? Ethical capital. Many companies now, and this company, the Santander Bank and the Foundation are an example of this, believe that doing something ethical actually builds the wealth of that country. Not the monetary wealth, but the spiritual wealth of that company. And finally, catalytic wealth. In other words, the capital you develop simply by doing this in the future. You don't know what an experience when you're very young may have on you sometime in the future. I was asked to define creativity, so I'm going to say it quite simply. There are two ways of being creative. I call them big C and little c creativity. The big C creativity, if I start with the little c creativity, that's everyday creativity. You use it constantly throughout your day and you're probably not even aware of it. As I look around the room, many of you have dressed very elegantly for today and you've used some creativity in choosing what to put on or how to get here. I have to use a lot of creativity in Spain because I don't speak Spanish, so I have to use a whole lot of creative ways of getting around. We use that literally thousands of times every single day. The big C creativity is when we turn those little moments into something wonderful. A song, an artwork, a brilliant building, a new product, a scientific discovery, and suddenly everyone else can see our creativity. What is the impact on the child? Now, each of these dot points is not something I've just randomly thought of. It is where there are at least 3 independent scientific studies that have shown conclusively that this is the output. But you can probably relate to these much more personally if you have your own child or a child in the school you've worked with. Communication skills, problem solving, creative talent, social awareness, self-esteem and confidence, quality of life and well-being, personal growth, feelings of self-determination, a sense of control, just pleasure and enjoyment. There are also 2 major social impacts, and for this reason alone, creativity is of core importance. One is communication, and the second is on partnership building. Because if you're going to survive in a time of great change, which is what we're facing now and in the foreseeable future, we need to have those capacities, the capacity to be able to communicate clearly and the capacity to be able to work with others. We cannot solve things on our own. What about the dreaded test scores? Well, we know that actually if you use more creative approaches, you can improve literacy scores, particularly writing and speaking. You can improve mathematics scores. You can decrease absenteeism. You can encourage perceptual cognition. You can increase a child's non-verbal reasoning. And 3 particular types of intelligence, an intelligence that's combinational, and we saw that in the first speaker with the brain connections, a type of intelligence that's exploratory, that can look beyond the things of now. And finally, an intelligence that's transformational, that you can move and transform into other aspects. Now, you probably don't know what these are, and I hope you don't know what these are. These are actually PISA scores. These are the dreaded international testing that's done, that ranks all the countries in Europe every time. And you know the answer to this question, who's number 1? Finland. So over here, I'm going to run. Finland is number 1, right? Now, you may not be able to see where Spain is, but I can tell you it's not number 1, right? It's right over here. Okay? Now, that's not to depress you, but what it is to do is to say that it's not currently working what's happening. So that's a very good excuse to make changes and make changes for the better. If you were Finland, you might say, maybe we shouldn't do much because we might start to affect this. But in your situation, you haven't got a heap to lose. In fact, you've only got Hungary underneath you, right? So you can try something a bit more experimental, is the suggestion. Now, a good friend and colleague of mine, a professor from California, is a great guy, but he's insane with looking at numbers. And he's done a whole lot of research. His name is James Cattrall, and he's looked at students over many, many years, and he's looked at a whole lot of figures that have been collected, and he wants to look at what makes a difference. Now, what he found was he compared students, and he looked at everything, whether they had single mothers, other countries, rich, poor. There was only one factor that significantly made a difference, and that was whether the child had a creative, arts-rich school experience. At the end of the day, that was the only thing that made a difference. And then he found that children who had had the arts and a creative school experience were 17.6% more likely to go on to university, 15% more likely to volunteer, 8% more likely to have good friendships, 20% more likely to vote, 10% less likely to be unemployed. He has kept following them through. So now at 26, when they've gone out into the adult world, what happens then? Well, this is interesting. The key point. Arts poor students, students who did not have this experience, were 5 times more likely to be unemployed and dependent on public welfare in the future. This is a particularly important point in Europe at the moment, as we see a growing number of young people doing nothing when they finish school. I want to give you one more thing and then I'll finish. In Europe, they now measure potential economic success, they used to measure it by a thing called gross domestic product, how many things you made, but it's no good making a lot of things if no one wants your things, right? That's not very useful. Then they decided they would use a measure of financial transactions. The more financial transactions a country makes, the richer you are. That was until Iceland collapsed. So now they look at a thing called pillars of innovation. And this is predicting how rich you'll be in the future because how innovative you are now. And the thing they measure under the category of human capital, making good people, look at the first one. Look at the first one. It's about the creative experiences in the school. Now, this is the list of countries that are the most innovative in Europe. Once again, do you know what the top country is? And it's not Finland. Near neighbour of Finland, though, up here, number 1, is Sweden. Finland is coming third, but is desperate to be number 1. The middle column that's sort of white is Europe. Where do we think Spain is on this? Sort of point with your fingers. Go on. Point. Everyone point. You're actually here. Right? You're just in that first sort of orange, the last bit before you fall into the blue. Right? What's also interesting is if you line up the countries by innovation, and you compare this by artistic participation of the country, you see a strange parallel. The more the population involves itself in creative activities generally, the higher your level of innovation. I won't go through these other than to do it very quickly so you can just see them as ideas. But apart from being sick, the thing that makes you feel the best is participation in culture. People who participate in culture are more likely to recycle their rubbish and participate in ecological programs. Young people who participate in culture are far less likely to be involved in crime. Business people who start a new business and who also participate in culture are likely to still have a very successful and growing business after 5 years compared to most small businesses that stop after 3 years. If you promote culture, you will have a stronger local identity. So when Santander builds its new cultural facility, it will increase the profile of Santander around the world. So my final thought, the thing I was meant to leave you on, be confident enough in your own creativity to see change as an opportunity to be seized, not as a threat. And I want to finish very briefly with a story from China about creativity. And it's a very old story. And it says that when the horses are in the fields, the horses get very agitated and they go up on their backs. So I have to, like this. And they're trying to get up in the clouds. And some horses manage to get up in the clouds. And if you look up in the clouds, you see them with their manes flowing in the winds of the cloud. But the horses must return to the field, so they come down from the clouds. But when they come down from the clouds, they've seen that there is a different way of seeing the field that they are ploughing, and forever they're changed. Thank you.